created and actually render it out. So this is where you should end up with. So if you look at each one of these, they're just simple, just transitions. We're going from one color to a different color. Of course, it's going to think a little bit. There it goes. Okay. And like I said before, we have 3 of them that are just regular layers. So they're just regular like wipes coming in. Okay. So like this one here is just that. There's just 3 layers. They rotate and scale to create that effect. This one here is just scaling at an angle. And then this one here is the Brady Bunch one using that pattern. And then you have 2 shape ones. So this is a shape one here. And then this is a shape one there. Okay. So by the time you're done, you should have at least 5 total that you've completed. 3 of them are done with layers. One of the layers, one is like the Brady Bunch thing, and then you have 2 that are created with shapes. If you look over here, you'll see all my stuff is organized into 2 folders. One of them is comps, which is all the compositions. So I created a folder, named it comps, and then they just drug all the stuff in here. Each one of these compositions is labeled so I know exactly what it is. Usually what happens is, let's say one doesn't play correctly inside your video for some reason. I can jump back to your After Effects file, actually find that one, and verify that you have the stuff there. All of my keyframes, if I go in here and hit U is the hotkey that shows whatever I have keyed. All of my keyframes have been easy eased, and they're all adjusted inside the speed graph. So don't forget to easy ease things and adjust them in your speed graph. So like every single one, if I look at every single one of these, they've all been adjusted. It'll be bad if one of them wasn't, right? There you go. My templates. There. But they all have. There we go. Perfect. Okay. And then there's all my final pieces nicely, one right after the other. Okay, so now I go to the end of this where I don't have anything happening, and I hit the N number key, and that stops my work area. So now I'm going to go up to File, I'm going to say Export, and I'm going to add this to my render queue. The render queue is where it takes all the stuff you've done and actually puts it into a movie or a sequence or something. So if I go to, let me make this bigger so you can see it. The arrows here are presets, okay? You hardly ever use the presets. If you had your own computer, you're at a studio, whatever, they would use presets. But these computers don't have presets that we would use. So you click right on the word. So just so you can see it, I'm going to go to the render settings and click best settings. Okay. So you go into your render settings, and in here, this is where you could set things like, I want my quality to be best. I want my resolution to be full. Some of the stuff you typically don't need to ever touch, but you can set a lot of stuff in here. Most of the time, we never have to go into this window because all of these settings are already set to something we would use. Now, where these settings would come in handy is, let's say you're doing a big project. It may take, let's say, 2 hours for you to actually render out the entire thing and give it to someone at full quality. So you may want to lower the quality settings of your stuff to maybe 1/4. That way at least you can give them something while they're waiting. I've had clients before that they want something like every single day because they want to see what you're working on every single day. And so you don't want to have to spend an hour rendering something out because then that's an hour less of work time that you can provide to them. So by lowering the quality, you're giving them a low-res version just so they get an idea of what it looks like, so they get an understanding of the feeling, the coloring, the movement. And then when it's final time, then we would crank this up, obviously, to full to make sure it's awesome. Okay? But like I said, typically you never have to go into the best settings because it's already the best settings. We do have to click on lossless. And this is where most people epically fail at doing this, because not just in this class, but in 3D class and any class that uses After Effects, this part really makes your stuff visible to me, okay? By default, it comes out as an AVI. So if you're working at home, typically your only option is going to be AVI unless you've installed QuickTime on your computer, okay? If you have a Mac, QuickTime comes pre-installed, but on a PC, it's not. So if you have a PC, download QuickTime, install it, and then you'll get other options in here like QuickTime. Yes, sir. No, the AVI is not QuickTime. The AVI is like the Windows media format. Correct. Okay. So for everything that we're going to turn in this class, we want it to be a QuickTime movie. So the end result should be a .mov file. Okay. It should not be a .avi file. There are some formats of AVI that actually do look pretty nice, but I want QuickTimes because I can play them pretty much on anything. Some AVIs will not play on a Mac. So I want to make sure that my QuickTime is functional. There's also some other stuff here you can do, like importing your stuff, importing and replacing stuff, setting proxies. This is more advanced stuff that eventually we'll get into, but for right now, we just want to leave it as the default, just say none. Now here, this is the kind of format that's coming out. So we're sending it as a QuickTime file, but inside QuickTime, there's a bunch of different ways that we can save a file. It's kind of like when you go to Photoshop and you save a picture, you're saving it as a PSD or a TIFF or a JPEG or some other format. All of those are different compression schemes. So QuickTime is the format, but we have to go to the format options and choose a different compression scheme. Now, if you have your cheat sheet, you'll see that on the cheat sheet it says QuickTime, and then it says something else on there. They would have their cheat sheet handy. Correct. So now we go to QuickTime, and now we go to okay. Now, all these things do is they take all the pixels that you have and they make it so that it's a readable format. Imagine that you had a picture that was like a gig, and now you have a movie that's 30 megabytes or 30 seconds, okay? So now you have basically 900 frames of this 30 gig image. That's like a lot of information to try to save into a movie. So what the codec does, what this thing does, is it takes that information and it tries to figure out the easiest way to put it into a movie format so that it's not a huge file. So you don't have like a 100 gigabyte file. These movies that come out of here, especially these first ones, should be relatively tiny, like under 100 megabytes, okay? If you have over 100 megabytes, you've done something wrong, all right? So H.264. Now if we had audio, we could click on the audio tab and we'd be able to pick from this list, which one? AAC, okay? But we don't have audio, so it doesn't matter. We could also just turn the audio off, which is down here. Because there's no audio, it's not a huge deal, so it shouldn't be a big deal. This is another area where we could change the size of our stuff. So we're working at 960 by 540. Your big screen TVs are 1920 by 1080. Your big screen TVs are like 4K, which is like huge. So if you're working on something that you don't want to take an incredibly long time, you could also resize your footage to something smaller. That way, again, it doesn't take as long, and then the client gets a smaller version. Yes, sir. Right. So, a lot of those kinds of issues are just random things that will happen through the compression itself. Okay. So every area that you want to put your video, you should always look at the upload settings. You should always look at the format settings. So these settings that we're doing right now are for this class. When you get into the industry and you're starting to work with stuff, you're going to have we need to have something that is a specific format, a specific compression, a specific whatever. That way you're optimizing it every step of the way. So for Google, for YouTube, the recommended upload settings are an MP4, which is obviously not what we're doing right here. Now, if I go back to this and I go to my format, you'll see that MP4 is not listed in here. There's other areas that you can go to that allow you to have even more options and even more tools to choose from for compression settings. If you go, like, you guys can't appreciate this. If when I was in college and we wanted to watch a video trailer, we would go to QuickTime's website, and QuickTime's website would have a bunch of movie posters. Under each poster was 3 links. This is the low quality version of the video, this is the medium, and then this is the high. And then you would click on it and you would wait for it to download, and then you could actually play the trailer. Like now you go to YouTube and you do that. We couldn't do that back then. So the compression was like a huge thing because those files, you're downloading an entire movie trailer, which is like 3 to 4 minutes. Sometimes they're 5 minutes long. Those got to be super small, and they got to be super clean and super clear. So they have even higher compressors, like actual like thousands of dollars of compression software to shrink these files so that they're super small but super good quality. Okay, this one's not going to be the best. Sometimes we will get some artifacts, like you're talking about the black bar on top or something, and then we just have to maybe adjust a little bit of settings or try doing it again. There are more settings inside this H.264, like keyframing or limiting the data rate that we could also play with to adjust some of that stuff. But for now, we're just going to leave it until we get an issue like that. Okay? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's converting it too. So the problem with converting is what happens is you're taking an already compressed video and then you're compressing it again and then you're getting something. So sometimes that works if you already have like a really good quality video and you compress it, you know, maybe not lose a whole lot of stuff. But sometimes when you take, like, let's say a JPEG, you save a JPEG, it's fine. But then you save it again, you're losing quality. You save it again, you're losing quality. Every time you save a JPEG, you lose quality. So the idea is that we want to go from our raw data, which is right from After Effects, and we want to make the movie right out of it. Mm-hmm. A one-time thing, exactly. This other program that comes with Adobe, this is Media Encoder. And this is another spot that you could actually convert your stuff. Inside of After Effects, instead of us going to export add to render queue, we could say add it to Media Encoder. And what it does is it links directly to Media Encoder and allows us to export from there. And if you look at the formats here, I guess I have to pick something. Oh, it's going to cancel. Whatever. They have a lot more formats in there. Now, let's say you're doing video editing and you want to take these things and you want to bring them into Premiere or whatever. You could actually go to export and you could export these right to Premiere right here. So if you are doing a project and you want to make sure that you don't degrade it, because when you save it out of Premiere, you're saving it as a movie again, you could actually export this right into Premiere, and that will make higher quality stuff, okay? And there's actually a good workflow with the Adobe products. One of the reasons that we have Adobe like kind of all over the place is because Adobe is very friendly with all of its own software. So if I'm editing a video in Premiere and then I say, oh, I want to do something to this clip, I can grab that clip and say, bring that into After Effects. And it brings that clip into After Effects and I edit it. And then I could say, okay, now send it back to Premiere. And it creates a dynamic link between those two things, which is pretty awesome. Like if you saw The Matrix, I'm sure people have seen The Matrix, right? You guys are sleepy. Oh, yeah. In The Matrix, there was a lot of After Effects stuff done to that. So what they would do is that they would edit all the videos together. Then they would say, in this scene, we need to have lightning bolts happening. So they would export that scene out, bring it into After Effects, add the lightning bolts, and then send it back to Premiere. Okay? So that's the kind of stuff that we would do. All right, so just to summarize what we've already done so far, because that was a segue, I'm going to go to Export, Add to Render Queue. This brings up the render queue. We clicked on the lossless settings. We chose QuickTime. We clicked on Format Options and chose H.264. Okay, and then I turned the audio off just for fun. There we go. Okay, then we have to make sure that we name our file. So you'll see it says output to, and it says not yet specified. So I'm going to click on the not yet specified. I'm going to save this to my P drive, 2200. Start going to page transitions, movies because I'm outputting my output because I'm outputting it. And then what am I going to name this? It's on your cheat sheet. Yep. Page transitions. Did it say first name too? Last name, okay. Yeah, so just Sarcona underscore page transitions is perfect. Now, if you do have a common last name, then definitely put your first initial or first name, just so I know. And then we hit the render button. Now, once you hit the render button, what it's going to do is it goes frame by frame, and it renders each one of these things out so that they can actually be viewed in a QuickTime format. Okay. Now, if you don't want to see this because it may seem minuscule now, but it's actually taking time for us to load this. If I hit the caps lock button, what it does is it doesn't update this viewer. So it's going to actually go maybe a little bit quicker when it renders this stuff out, as opposed to trying to show us the frame and render it out and save it to the thing. So I always hit caps lock, let it do its thing. This blue bar is going to go across, and you'll see that it actually is kind of like it went pretty quick here. Now it's going kind of slow. Sometimes you'll just hit a spot where it just is kind of slow. Sometimes the entire thing is kind of slow. You'll see there's an elapsed time, which is right now 48 seconds, 58 seconds. And then there's an estimated remaining time. It'll show you here what frame it's on. Right now it's on frame 92. Way over here, it shows you how many frames are left, 222, or how many are total. I can click on this arrow here and get even more information. So right now it's showing me, here's what it's working on. Here's the composition, there's the layer, here's the stage it's at, here's my current file size, here's the estimated final file size. So if you look at that final file size, you can see that's nowhere near hundreds of megabytes, which for this assignment is where you should be at. If you have more colors, that's going to add more to your final file size. If you have like crazy stuff going on, that's going to add more to your final file size. But definitely nowhere near like 100 megabytes. And then you get the beautiful chime when you're done. And then we find it on my desktop in my P drive. I go to my output folder. There's my movie. I do a figure 8 with my mouse while I'm waiting. There we go. And we open it. And then what this is going to do is it's going to open up the video so that we could actually watch it. We hit the play button. Now I did notice something odd that happened right there. Like, I don't know what that is. It's cool. It's not what I wanted. That's not it. Diagonal blues. There we go. So that's definitely not what looks here. Like, this just comes straight out. Do that. Let me go to my final comp and see if it's like that too. Okay. Now, what could be happening with this, and this is kind of one of those things where you just kind of have to like backwards work to figure out why it's doing that. I used an adjustment layer to give this some coloration. And part of that is I did a curves on it and then this hue and saturation. So what could be happening that we're just not seeing here, let me crank this up to full. There we go. Okay. So just me looking at this at half, it's not seeing those extra corrections, but then when I go to full, I am seeing it. So I believe it's coming from the curves. Thinking, see the blue bar thinking? Nope. Hue and saturation? Nope. Where are you coming from then? What are you doing? And it's probably part of my motion blur. Yeah, it definitely is. But just don't make sense. Just don't make no sense. Let's go turn this one off. There it is. So I just edited my scale. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense of why it would be doing that, unless my scale is just so tiny that it's just having an issue with it. So I'm going to go to my graph editor for my scales. And I'm just shift clicking each one of these. Correct. Now this is a speed graph. I don't want to edit the speed of these anymore. What I want to do is I want to take my scale of the Y and just make the Y thicker at the start of it. Okay. So that's where I could right click and go to my value graph. And now I can see here's where all the Y's are. Right there. They're all like really low. So if I just grab those and scoot them up. Maybe it'll do something. Oops. I went to the wrong spot. That was the wrong spot. I have to zoom in here and grab it right there. That's the spot I wanted. So I'm going to wait until this updates. There we go. All right, so that looks like that fixed it. Okay, so me going to 1, which was like 1 pixel thin, it was basically just too thin for After Effects to do that. We're still, excuse me, we're still dealing with pixels here. So 1% thin was just too thin for it. So now if I go back to my final comp, oops, let me go back to my blue things here and make sure that my adjustment layers are back on. There we go. Cool. All right, so now I can just go back to my final comp, go back to File, back to Export, back to Add to Render Queue. Click on Lossless, lossless again. QuickTime, Format Options, H.264. Just turn my audio off. Click on the same name, make sure it's already closed. There we go. Yes, replace it, and then hit Render again. Okay. So it's a common thing for you, these little random issues to just pop up. And then we just had to work through them. We got to figure out why it's doing it, and then obviously get rid of it. Those things, like I said, they would just randomly just, whatever happened just came up. Yes, ma'am. No, not necessarily, because it doesn't happen that often, especially because you could go through each one at full, and then you're going to render it out anyway, and something else might pop up. There we go. So now we'll look at it again, and hopefully we won't have that same issue. Gorgeous. Okay, cool. Now these things, like I said, this assignment, it's a pretty simple one. It goes through the basics of understanding how to set keyframes, how to ease them, change their speed, and then how to adjust things in the graph editor. And then obviously how to duplicate, change colors, and some other basic fundamentals. Now once it's fully done, we're going to take this folder and we're going to drop it onto your Z Drive's 2200 folder. The Z drive is down right now, so we can't turn it in today. So next class, when you come in, we should be able to grab your page transition folder and drop it right into the Z drive when it's all done. Okay? Okay. Now, the question came up last time of how do we save it as other things? Like, let's say I wanted to save this as a different format to use somewhere else. So I'm going to go to, oops, I'm in here. I'm going to go to Export, add to Render Queue. Now, if we wanted something like to have transparency in here, you can see where I can go to like a ping sequence or even a tip sequence. And then in this, I can set my RGB in alpha. And what this should do is give me my transparency out, so that when you're taking this to another application, you'll actually get the transparency in there so that you could layer these on top of things. So if you're going to go into Avid or Final Cut or whatever, you should be able to do that. Now a sequence is going to be labeled differently. So you'll see that this one, it doesn't give us a .mov, it gives us a .ping. And because a ping is an image, we can't save a movie into an image, so what we get is a sequence of images. So I'm just going to rename this to final comp dot bracket pound bracket dot ping. There we go. I just want you to see this because at some point you may need to use this. Because I just rendered it out, I didn't change anything, this goes super quick, okay, which is awesome. So now, correct. All right, so here is my movie, and then if I go to my final comp folder that I just made, you'll see that it made a folder or a file for each one of my images. Okay, so every single one of my frames is now right here. So then I can use that to kind of stack on top of it, which is neat. You don't need to do that for this assignment. I just wanted to show it to you so you had it. I need to go delete that, otherwise I'm going to forget, and then I'll say, why is my hard drive so full? It does, but there's some, this is only 5 meg, so it's not terribly bad. There are some programs that you don't want to compress stuff, like let's say I'm going into Avid. There's no direct link for me to go from Premiere or from After Effects into Avid, so I would save it as a sequence. And the cool thing is a sequence is basically an uncompressed version of it. As long as you pick just a bunch of pictures, right? It's basically like a high-res version of every frame. So when I go into something like Avid, I can just say I'm bringing in a sequence of images, and it would load all those sequence of images. And then it depends too. Some software is very specific as to it'll only take pings, or it'll only take TIFFs, or only take JPEGs. Cool. All right. Okay, so I would obviously save that, turn it in, whatever. So now what I want